want to show you a slide here that is relevant to our study, and it's just good to have a little bit of an overview. I'm going to put that up for just a moment. This is the 8 visions of Zechariah. Some people break them up slightly differently, but generally speaking, most people think there are 8 of them. Now notice that these visions are all packed into chapters 1 through 6, but there's 12 or 14 chapters in Zechariah, so there's additional stuff going on at the end of the book that are not related to visions. So the first vision that we dealt with is the man among the myrtle trees. We dealt with the second vision, which is the 4 horns and the 4 craftsmen. We dealt with the man with the measuring line. We talked about the cleansing of the high priest, Joshua the high priest. We talked a little bit about this golden menorah, or 7 menorahs seemed like more likely, with these 2 olive trees. That's where we're at right now, is kind of just touching up a little bit of finishing touches on this golden menorah, or 7 of them, and these 2 olive trees that are perpetually feeding the oil of the Spirit, if you will, into this golden menorah, the 7 different menorot, I suppose it would be in Hebrew, which really is a symbol of his body, his church, the assembly, through the power of the Holy Spirit. It's a fascinating and very complicated metaphor, and we're going to deal with that a little bit today and talk about these 2 witnesses. Because I know that the 2 witnesses are pretty fascinating for a lot of people. And then later on, we will get to chapter 5 and 6, which we have the flying scroll, or the flying roll, or whatever that is, the woman in a basket, and the 4 chariots. So we got some strange stuff coming up here that we're going to need to try to untangle. I cannot guarantee that that will make any sense. So this first item is this weird contraption that's providing oil perpetually for light. It's not dependent upon people. It's dependent upon the Spirit of God. It's a symbol of God's power through His Spirit to do His work. And previewing the 2 things that we want to talk about is this key phrase that I picked up on, which is despising the day of small things. I think that's a powerful idea that we should discuss briefly. And then, of course, the 2 anointed ones. I think those are the things that we really need to tackle just a little bit. And we may get to an opportunity to actually read Zechariah Chapter 5, just to get a preview for next time we get together. So there it is. First thing we want to do is reread a little bit of Zechariah Chapter 4, verses 8 through 14. So I'm going to put those up on the screen for you. All right, here we go. I'm going to read. It says in Zechariah 4 and 8, "Also the word of Yah came to me, saying, The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, and his hands will finish it. Then you will know that Yah of hosts has sent me to you. For who has despised the day of small things? But these 7 will be glad when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. These are the eyes of Yah, which range to and fro throughout the earth. Then I answered and said to him, this angel who was giving him some information, What are these 2 olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side? No response. So he asks again and said unto him, What are the 2 olive tree branches through which the 2 golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? And he answered me and said, Do you not know what these are? And I said, No, my Lord. Then he said, These are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. So, totally clear. Makes perfectly good sense, right? So I thought it was fascinating, first of all, that he's like, Hey, what does this mean? Like, he didn't say nothing. He's like, Well, let me ask again. What does this mean? Are you unaware of what this means? Yes, Lord, I am unaware. So the first thing is going back to this little part here, which is who has despised the day of small things? Now, I think that the Hebrew construction, if you look at it in the text, it actually I think the baser meaning is it's kind of like a rhetorical question. Nobody despises the day of small things. Now, when you think of that expression, the day of small things, what does your mind come to when it's talking about the day of small things? What do you think of that? What does that make you think of?
Small things come in good packages.
Small things come in good packages. Yes, Tracy. Oh wait, microphone. Thank you, Tracy.
It kind of sounds like the opposite of the great and terrible day of the Lord to me. I don't know. I've not really thought about it, but that's just what it made me think of.
That's a good insight. Is Nathan Briscoe in here? I did not see that. Nathan, are you physically there? Can you turn on your camera? Oh my God. Look at that. We were just talking about you the other day. How are you? I'm delighted to see you. And it's you have a question or a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when I hear small beginnings, it just sounds like or small things. I've always heard it's small beginnings. So it's just things start small. Yeah, that was my thought on that.
Yeah, I thank you, Nathan.
John always says throughout there, is it a small thing to you that I do this and that? And that's just a common phrase that he uses. So it's connected with something.
Absolutely.
Is that those things he said when he was here?
Angela said what?
Oh, I thought.
No one can hear you.
Yeah,
Not Yeshua, no,
okay.
Yah in the word.
Oh yeah.
In the thing that I did this.
In the prophets, yes.
up.
Brett, would you hand the microphone to Ella for me? Thank you, sir.
I was just going to say that in the TS 2009 version, it does say small beginnings instead of small things.
Beginnings instead of small things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of makes a little bit more sense. Angela, what were you saying a second ago?
Oh, nothing. I was asking Brett a question.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, the idea of small things, I think we want to consider this in two different lights, okay? Number one, from a historical perspective, from these two guys, Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest, who are, and also the prophet himself, Zechariah, who's actually alive when this is happening in Jerusalem as they're trying to rebuild this temple. Remember just the practical application, which is they're building a temple which probably, if you're looking at the book of Haggai, is very much inferior to the one that was destroyed by the Babylonians. And they're feeling rather put upon and saying, man, this is nothing. You know, we're not achieving anything here. We're building a ramshackle little temple, which is a shade of its former glory. God is not going to dwell in this temple. It's such a worthless structure. Does that ring any kind of bells for you? I mean, you can look in the prophet of Haggai and talk about it. It's like, you know, the prophet actually says, you know, how many of you had seen this temple? Now, that was a long time ago, so I think that's obviously probably a rhetorical question. But they have in their mind's eye or in the tales of their ancestors the vision of this magnificent temple that Solomon had built with all kinds of gold and wood paneling overlays and beautiful embroidery. And these guys are putting something together. There's only a handful of people there. They don't have a whole ton of money. They're just trying as best they can to build something. That's right. So this is especially poignant for them because this is a small thing to them in their eyes. But in what way would you say that the prophet is telling them to be encouraged? Why would this be a small thing that might become greater? Is it going to literally, historically become greater? And is it glorious? Is Father's Spirit connected with it? Just from what you know, what would you say? Angela? Brett, would you hand her that microphone for me?
Well, right before that, he says, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. And so if you were building a house, you would start with the foundation, which might be considered a small beginning. Yes. And then what was built on that would follow. So maybe he's referring to the establishment of it.
Right.
Like, and there's so many things that harken back to this, like, you know, when Jacob's sets up the stone and anoints it. That, you know, and then later you have this stone with 7 eyes, and you see in Isaiah that the Spirit rests on the stone, the 7 spirits. And so it's almost like everything is referring to this foundation stone that's being laid, and that when, and then small beginnings would be like maybe his first coming. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I think that's a delightful insight. When you think of small beginnings, you can and you should apply this both literally, historically, as well as metaphorically and spiritually to, frankly, the greater house that is being built by Yah's Spirit, because there's a lot that can be discussed there. But you think about every building has to start with a plumb line in somebody's hand to try and make the walls straight. You got to start with a cornerstone to build from that is level and straight. Did you want to say something, Ella? Yeah, would you hand that to Ella for me?
Just real quick, I was just going to say, kind of metaphorically and physically, a seed kind of makes me think of that. It's a small thing that...
Seed.
It's something tiny that ends up being big.
Yes, that's a great insight. A seed, I mean, Yeshua tells the parable about this mustard seed, which becomes quite large, which is a very strange parable because a mustard plant is actually not that large. That's a very interesting parable. But yeah, it makes you think about, and I think if we were to kind of delve into that and get a little, just internalize that encouraging word, I think what's most important is we recognize that there are big things happening in your life, in the life of people around you, and they always start small, and they might seem insignificant. And I think the seed of faith that is planted in each one of you can start off small and seemingly insignificant, but remember that, going right back to that mustard seed parable, Yeshua said if you had just a tiny sliver of faith, you could move mountains. It's interesting that we also have the mountain referred to just a little bit ago in this chapter, which said, you know, what are you, the great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you will become a plain. So there's interesting connections there with seeds and mountains and small things beginning. I'd like to share with you a couple of scriptures that I think hint at this and also talk about this building up of the house, okay? And you guys probably know already what I'm going to share here. Let's look at this. It says in 1 Peter, we are in 1 Peter 2 and 4, it says, drawing near to him, that is the Messiah, a living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by Elohim and precious, you also as living stones are being built up a spiritual house, a set apart and holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices that are acceptable to Elohim through Yeshua the Messiah. So this is, again, another one of those small, seemingly insignificant things which becomes a part, either it itself becomes something much greater or it forms an integral part of something that is much greater. And in that respect, each of you is a spiritual brick, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. You are a stone being built into this magnificent edifice of the Holy Temple. But I think we can also look at Revelation in 2, and I'll take you there in just a second, Revelation chapter 2, 21, excuse me, where you can actually start to see the fulfillment of this promise, which is very mystical and strange. And I'm gonna put that up for you on the screen right here. It says in Revelation 21 and 9, it says, the angel talking to John says, come and I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, there's that mountain again, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of the heaven from Elohim, having the glory of Elohim, and her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, as clear as crystal. So it's interesting that this city of Jerusalem coming down out of the heaven is the bride. which makes sense because Peter was just talking about how each one of you is a spiritual stone that is being built into this holy temple of God. So I think a lot of people talk about this vision here that John had, where it's like, is there literally a city coming down out of the heavens, or is this city a metaphor for something else? What are your thoughts?
Very well.
Yeah?
As in Jerusalem, the saying was crazy. It was during the bombing of the Israelites in Jerusalem. There was a round table where John Baez was there.
All right, Phil.
And there he used to go there.
Thanks for sharing it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm telling you, Solomon.
Well, hold on a second, Phil. Brett, you got the mic, bro.
Metaphors for
Yeah, grab the
clouds
mic.
as well, coming down with the clouds. So other saints, Malachim,
Yes.
coming with Yeshua.
Yep. Tracy?
I'm reminded also of Matthew 5, I believe he says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on the hill cannot be hidden." So he's comparing his people to this city as well. So I think it's more metaphorical.
Yeah, I do too.
Essentially, the city-
Angela, microphone.
A city is essentially a collection of people. We tend to think in terms of geography and land and city limits, but a city is a collection of people with something in common. And I think that ever since the cities were mentioned in the beginning, like with Babylon, it was a collection of people with a common goal. And so when you have the final Babylon in Revelation, you're not talking about New York or Rome or some actual city. You're talking about a collection of people with a common goal, which is a global thing. It's becoming a global thing.
And that's something it's interesting that you bring that up, because you look at the metaphor, if you want to just call it a metaphor, that metaphor that is brought up in Revelation, where it goes on for a whole chapter about this city of Babylon that is fallen, and it talks about all of the commerce and stuff that is happening in this city, and the people and the ships wailing about the fall of this great city. It's very likely that that's all a metaphor, but I mean, could you be literally talking about some great city in the future that is fallen? Sure, of course. But I think your point is well taken, Angela, that what you're really talking about is a city is always a collection of people who share a common goal. Now, the city of Elohim is of a very different spiritual nature than the city of Babylon.
Rabbi, Larry and I we're going to head on because it's getting kind of late.
Understood.
But I thank you for your sermon.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Your guitar playing was wonderful.
Thank you, Phil.
And let's hope for the best for Jerusalem.
Thank you. Absolutely.
And the Israelites.
Absolutely.
I think after all the wars, there'll be peace of mind and mercy mild on earth
When the Messiah arrives.
for all that he bestowed before us.
Thank you, Phil. Who is Linda? Were you going to say something? Thank you, Phil.
Okay, right.
Appreciate it, buddy. We'll talk.
Good. Maybe we'll come back someday.
All right.
It'd be nice.
It'd be good.
And
Thanks,
your
Larry.
guitar playing was wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon, Larry.
Goodbye now, folks. It was good being here. And
Shabbat
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Larry,
We gotta head on because it's so long.
Linda, were you going to say something?
Come on, Phil.
Okay. Where you at, love? Okay. That's it.
Bye.
Sorry, Linda, did you have your hand up, or were you going to say something? No? Okay.
Oh, I was gonna say
Yes, please.
I said in the car I wasn't going to talk much. I'm really
Oh,
sorry.
thank you for talking. I love it when you talk.
The other thing that came to mind is when Messiah says you must be born again. If you look at that word again, it's anothen, which means from above. So again, the people coming from above, being born from the heavens above and coming down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great insight. Great insight. So I think, I guess, the only thing that I really had intended to just briefly chat with you about is to just remember that I guess I wanted to kind of have a key takeaway from this section be talking about, small things, small beginnings, things that seem insignificant at the time, but that turn out to be quite significant and quite powerful. If I could have my druthers, I would say, I want you to start to see yourself in that way. That you, even though you are a seemingly insignificant person in the grand scope of things, that you begin to see yourself as an integral part, that you see yourself as having a mission, as having a good part to play in this grand scheme of things. And you don't know what that is. You know what I'm saying? It's like the people that come into your life. If you have a small circle of influence, whether it's just your husband and your daughter, or your husband or your wife, or one child, two child, you don't even work, so your influence seems small. It can actually be quite large, because all it takes is one person that you have influenced in some way to be an influence on multiple other people. And I guess I just want us to be encouraged by that. But more than that, also, I want combining this idea with the golden menorah, with those pipes feeding into it, which really speaks to me of the power of Yah in the life of a person is tremendously powerful to do the work. It's enough to do the work. But I guess the important thing that I would point out here is this is the part that's challenging for me, is looking at the state of the world, looking at the place that those of you who are following God with all your hearts, you are the ones who are going to make a difference. And that seems, how unlikely does that seem? That here we are flung around the planet at the far ends of the world. We're about as far from Jerusalem as you can possibly get on this planet. And we're just meeting in this house, a little group of people. And it seems so small and insignificant, but it's huge. And God is going to do a great work in your life for this planet. But what's interesting is that He's going to do it through His power and not yours, because you don't really have any power except the power that He gives you. So I guess that the point that I would make is we have to balance, and this is a hard thing to do, and it kind of goes back to the discussion we had at our last Midrash regarding, what is God's responsibility and what is my responsibility? And these two things seem very much out of balance, but God's power is going to complete the work. It's not going to be you, but He really wants you involved. So the work is going to be done through someone, right? To a degree. Yeshua is going to show up and do His work. And somebody mentioned a moment ago regarding the Messiah's first coming. Seems like a small thing. Some obscure dude in Jerusalem in the first century who had an impact on a few thousand people. What did that turn into? Within a fairly short period of time, this man and his god, whatever, influenced people that turned the whole world upside down. That's a powerful, powerful thing by the Spirit of God to change the whole world through one man, His Son, who spread it to 12 men, who spread it to 70 men, who spread it to a small group of people, who got persecuted and had to spread into the kingdom even more. And it just turned the whole world on its head in a very short period of time. So that's small things by the power of God's Spirit turning out to be great things. Thelma, I think you wanted to say something. Grab that microphone.
Well, to the story, it only takes a few.
Yes. There's a little book that we sometimes read it at Hanukkah time. It's like, it only takes a few who know what's right and to do it too. And you know what? Especially poignant right now for those of you who are curious about Hanukkah, or maybe some of you observe Hanukkah. I don't know if you're aware of this. You probably are. That last night was the first night of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is not a biblically mandated festival. It's just a culturally historical thing that the Jews have done for a long time because of what happened in the Maccabean revolt, which really is about a small group of people standing up against the tyranny of an oppressive government who was trying to force them to violate the commands of Yah. And I know that those of you who have looked at some end times prophecy type of stuff can see that what happened to the Maccabees at that time was very much a partial fulfillment of what's happening in the book of Daniel. I mean, it's very clear if you've read the book of the Maccabees that that's a partial fulfillment. It's not a full fulfillment, but it is definitely a partial fulfillment. And I think it shows a pattern that you can perhaps see, playing out before you now. So I think it's important that we exercise control over pessimism and defeatism as we feel small and insignificant against a world that is turning against us. That's an important part of it. But also not be complacent. To continue, what can you do? And I would ask each of you right now to share. Not each of and every single one of you, but anybody, what can you do as a small nugget in this great wall, this great temple of Jerusalem? Evan, would you hand that to Evan for me, Thelma?
If you're talking about small things that you can do that can make an impact on people, I think just checking in to see how they're doing is something that's underrated. Yes.
Thank you, Evan. That's a great insight. You can check in with somebody. My wife always told me that a good thing you can do if there's very little that you can do is to make yourself available. If nothing else, make yourself available. And I think Evan's insight is excellent. Call someone. Call someone you haven't talked to in a while. Tell them you're thinking about them. Tell them you're praying about them. Ask them if you can pray for them for anything. You got anything going on in your life you need prayer for? Great idea. Great idea. That's a light in the world right there. Thelma?
Yes. I don't think we realize what kind of light and what kind of effect it has on a real world. Light dispels the darkness.
Yeah. Oh,
and it doesn't say how much light. Light,
right.
period.
A little tiny light is a powerful thing.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
And if people would just grasp onto the fact of the light that God has put inside them and use that and allow God to use you on a daily basis in very small things like the mustard seed.
Yeah.
Some people plant those tiny little seeds. Somebody else is going to come by and water it. Somebody else is going to dig up the dirt,
right.
Put some stuff on top of it. I mean, there's lots of different roles in the process. And we don't know the ripple effect of what one little thing we do. It could be a smile, a handshake, a pat on the back. Yeah. I pray for people that don't even believe in God.
Absolutely.
And they'll tell me all their troubles, sit in my office, and I'll go, well, I know you don't believe in my God, but I'm going to pray for you anyways. Yeah. And they always say thank you, and they keep coming back.
Sure.
So you never know what kind of effect you can have just by doing tiny little things.
Absolutely. You give that to Lou for me, and then Angela. I told you before about a guy who was just out of nowhere, just started telling me all about his life. I had that happen again this week. And you just need to make yourself available. You just got to be curious. That's all you really have to do is just be curious about people. What's going on with you?
We don't like to listen, we like to talk.
Yes. What's going on with you? Just ask the question. They'll tell you if you're really curious. If you're just making small talk and they know that, they won't tell you nothing. Lou.
Well, an example, setting a good example, and sometimes we're the only Bible that other people see.
Yes. Yes. You are the Word of God.
Right.
You could be the only Word of God that they actually ever see. That's a great insight, Lou. Give that to Thelma and she'll give it to Angela.
Kind of the same thing they were saying. I don't know if you've ever been out there at the grocery store or wherever and you've bumped into somebody who's really grumpy, and it ruins a good part of your day. Just the way someone was driving or the snarkiness that they were, just a little bit of sass at you. You can do the same thing by I don't know, sometimes when I pick up groceries at the store, the guy there, he's just so pleasant. And I drive away just feeling a little lighter than I did when I got there. And to spread that around, there's this one girl that works at the Fry's up here, and she looks like her dog just died every day for the past 3 years. I've seen her. She's the most miserable person I've ever seen, and she wears it on her face. And I used to avoid that line at the store. And now when I see her, I'm like, oh, here's my chance. Let me see if I can get her to smile. And I've never gotten her to smile, but no matter how she is, I walk up and I'm like, hi, how are you? And I just try to give her a little extra, a little sugar. Yeah, but it's like a challenge. And it gets so much more contrasty in the world today because there's so many people out there that are just impatient, frustrated, just angry, and so to just be smiley and positive is like just stands out so much easier.
You know, that's a great insight. And you know, my wife has taught me over the last 30 years to be considerate of other people. I did not know that.
I taught him that.
I did not know that. I did not know that you were supposed to be considerate of other people until my wife told me that. But you know what? You know, is a big thing for me. I'm not naturally very concerned about other people. But you know what? What's that? Yes. Well, you know what? I had to learn, and I think that we need to recognize that. We just have to learn. You know what I started to do? I started to take notes, literally take notes, because it's not going to stick in my mind. When I talk to somebody here, it's like, when I'm done, I'm taking notes. Because so-and-so said, oh yes, this is going on in my life. I need to write that down because I'm going to totally space it. I know it may seem like I'm saying I don't care about you, but I really do. But what I'm saying is, it's just the trick that I'm telling you, that small thing that you can do, take notes. Caitlin has a little purse around her neck that has pen and paper in it, and scissors and a stapler too. But man, what a delightful thing to have. You can take notes about the people you talk to. You know, what's going on with you? Oh, well, let me write that down. You know, there's nothing better when I talk to my coworkers, the people that I work with. Man, I take notes about everything they say so that when I talk to them next, I ask them, how's that situation going? They're like, you remember
They
that?
love that.
They really do love that when you remember things about their lives. I'm terrible at remembering things, so I write it down. So if you need to use a cheat sheet to write down notes about people, the things that they tell you, do it. It's a wonderful, wonderful gadget. Does anyone else have any thing that they would throw into the pot? I want to inspire you to just remember those small things. I think Evan said, just ask people how they're doing. Praying for people, writing down things that people tell you. Would you give the microphone to Tracy for me? Thank you, Brett. You guys online can also talk in case you're wondering.
I'm just thinking personally, like encouraging people who you see preaching the word, and like, to me, like, as I know, I always I feel like I have to do something with this information that I've been given, and so what do I do with it? I'll write a paper, and then it turned into, I'll make a video, and I'll post it on Facebook or whatever, and then you start feeling like, why am I doing this? Nobody even cares. But then you get one person that comes along and says, what an impact this had. So it's just like, that's that moment where you go, okay, there's a reason. Yeah. Even if you can't see it or you don't know it's out there, it's always encouraging to just help somebody along, saying, I appreciate what you're doing.
And it may seem small and insignificant. Would you hand that to Lou, and then behind Lou to Evan? Oh, there he goes. Okay. Well, he's stealing it. He's co-opting it.
Go ahead.
Well, maybe.
Good. Lou co-opted the mic. Okay, go ahead, Lou.
It's your poor beauty. Ride that bike.
Thank you. But Tammy and myself and John have read a book called Unoffendable.
Unoffendable.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Yeah, what it talks about is that as a person of God, that we can't be offended by what another person says or what another person does to us. Yeah. Not easy.
Yeah.
Not easy, but it's something, like I said, the example that you set. If you fire back at them, you're no better than they are.
Absolutely. If your attitude is no different than theirs, you're not a light to the world, for sure. Evan or Hayden?
Insofar as ways to be good and helpful to the people around you. I think the most successful things I've seen done is listening to someone, asking questions that aren't loaded, so they don't come with an answer that they know they should give you. They're just open questions that draw out more thoughts on whatever line of thinking that they were already progressing through. And then repeating back to them what they've said, reworded, so that they know you heard them.
Yes.
So they give a little information, you pull out more, and not on a new thread, but on the same thread they were already working on. And then you summarize so that they know you heard them.
Excellent communication
And even
skills.
if you give no advice, you'll have helped them tremendously, I think.
Yeah, I find that just letting somebody talk a lot of times is a really good thing. You don't necessarily need to do anything. You know how many, I think that's a big thing that I'm noticing lately is there must not be very many people listening out there because people are desperate for an ear. And if you just let them talk, they're happy to do it. And you can get a lot of insight into what's going on in their lives, things you can pray for. That's one of those small things that can make a big difference. So I want to encourage you to just think more about the small things that you can do. Gracie, would you hand Gracie the microphone for me? Thank you. I expect one of you online to say something in the next 5 minutes.
Just on a personal note, from what's being said right now, there's a thing that when you think of me, pray about it because it's hard for me. But I think the Lord's trying to teach me a lesson with regard to a really dear friend of mine she's born over in Germany or one of those countries while Hitler was in regime. And she can talk your ear off. You try to bring it around to the Lord because she's telling all the awful stuff and how it affected her and all this stuff, and I try to bring her back to the Word. And I'm really, and I think successfully, letting the Lord tell me when to back off and when to just say, but Barbara, listen, this isn't about you and me, it's about eternity. Is it going to be with our Creator or is it going to be with Hitler?
Yeah. That's a good insight.
And I really just love this lady. Yeah. She's precious.
Yeah.
But she is so lost.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I appreciate you bringing that up, Gracie, because that kind of, I think you ought to explore that a little bit more because I find that I struggled with that a lot a few years ago, and I still do to some degree. When you're talking to someone and they're expressing to you, you have opened up your ears enough to give them an opportunity to talk. But when you do start listening to them, what you think to yourself as you're listening to them complain about this or that or the other thing, I have the solution for you. Yes. And what that conversation turns right around to where, and this is what you got to watch out for, you're no longer listening. You suddenly are no longer interested in hearing what they're saying. You're more interested in, oh, wait. I need to tell you something. It's like, no, but you got to have wisdom and you got to have the spirit discerning so that you can find out, okay, wait, when is the right time for me to interject? Because if you're looking for an opportunity to share your knowledge, share your wisdom, share what you think will be good for them, you've interrupted the flow. But there's a point where someone's going, no, it's all terrible. You can't just let them keep puking and over and over and over. At some point, you've got to say, you know what? It sounds like you're really unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Why did you know like that?
What is that? Because your spirit is really heavy. I can tell that you're very affected. You're getting below the surface now. Okay? That's the question. You're not telling you, let me tell you what I think is important, and let me tell you what I think is going to fix you. You need to know about this. You need to know about that. You just ask a question, just like Hayden said a second ago. You ask the question. It sounds like you're really unhappy. What's going on there, Brett?
Yeah, you nailed it. I deal with a lot of unhappy homeless people, and you can offer them solutions. Jeremy's laughing because he knows that. But that's me taking authority. And unless they give me that authority to do that in their life, I'm not their daddy. Who's your daddy? Are you worshiping Satan? Or are you worshiping Yah?
Right.
If you're worshiping Yah, then I can give you his counsel
Right.
if you accept it.
You got to want it.
And if you don't, then you're constantly going to have a depressing spirit attacking you, and they're going to come to you all the time. And bleh.
Absolutely. They'll puke all over you all the time if you don't establish some kind
Boundary.
of some kind of a boundary.
based on Torah.
Absolutely. But I think it's the important part is the question and listening. If they don't know that you're actually listening,
Do not even greet them, it says in 2 John. If they don't bring that, if they're transgressing and you know they're transgressing, you point it out to them.
yeah,
Have nothing to do with them.
right. And there's a point there where it's like, well, that's probably a topic for a different time. But what I would say is, you've always heard the expression, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. Same thing. So learn to listen, learn to pay attention and ask good questions and find out what's going on in the lives of these people. They'll tell you, I know there's a lot of people out there who are hurting right now. They're very confused, they're very lonely, they're afraid, and they're looking for some kind of hope. But you have to listen and get below the surface first. Then you can begin to work. Don't always be prepared to share the gospel as soon as you see an opening. Don't cram and shove and push. Listen first. Make yourself available. Make yourself compassionate. Hear what's going, really hear what's happening in their lives. Once you do that, they open up. They become soft to you. Now you're a small thing doing a big thing through his spirit, just by listening. Anybody online? Yes, ma'am. Who is it? It's Angela. Okay, get ready online. I'm coming back.
You were just having a conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and it was about something that was, I guess, contentious. I don't know if it was contentious, but it was. But you asked a question that totally halted it and switched the direction of the whole thing. You said, instead of saying like what you thought your opinion was on the matter, or trying to shoot holes in the other person's opinion, you said, why do you think that bothers you so much? And that other person was like, couldn't get over how that question affected them. And now they had to like stop and think about it from a completely different angle. So it was like this non-judgmental thing, but it was like, why do you think that bothers you so much? It was just a simple little thing.
Simple question that just cuts right through it. Lou, and then Shmoop.
Well, I just have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
It's always question in my mind, and why do people accept something else? There's always a question. It doesn't make sense. It really does not make sense.
Betsy, I'm coming to you, and I'll tell you why I think, Lou. It's because they think that they already know what you're offering, and they don't want it.
Why?
Because people have given them a very bad impression of what a Christian is. They have probably never seen a real Christian. Would you hand that over to Ella? I'm coming back to you, Betsy, in just 1 second. You're up next. Hold on to that, Ella. But Lou, you bring up something that I think we cannot underestimate, which is people hear that you're a Christian. They've already got a preconceived idea in their mind. You're a hypocrite. You're intolerant. You're unreachable because you're living in some different world. I don't know what their preconceived ideas are, but they might be accurate. I don't know. Not in your case, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that people out there have a preconceived idea about what a Christian is. And it's not real. I personally think that when I talk to people they think they understand what a Christian is because they've been watching Christians for 2,000 years, and they're like, yeah, that doesn't really interest me. I get it. It doesn't really interest me either. See what I'm saying? So if you let them know, I love you. I'm interested in talking to you. I'm interested in knowing who you are and what makes you tick and how I can help you. You're forming a whole new perception of what a Christian is. And that's when you can get under their skin. Hold that thought, Ella. Betsy, tell me what's on your heart, sister. You have to unmute yourself if you have an opportunity.
Okay, well, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, so I just typed it in there. I wrote that, sometimes, or I'll say that sometimes we forget to reach out to those closer to us, our spouse, those that have children, our family. And we're sometimes so busy to spread the word out of our home, but I think we need to also make our home a priority.
Betsy?
Betsy just hit the nail on the head.
Betsy hit it right on the head. My wife has been telling me that for years. You guys are of the same spirit, and I really appreciate that, which is do not trip over the people who are right in front of you to try and find someone to help. If your husband, wife, children, immediate surroundings are not lined up nicely in a row, you got no business talking to anybody. Period. That's just my opinion. Thank you. That's a great insight, Betsy. Ella.
This is slightly, I mean, it's the same topic, but it's not this theme, I guess. And I was just thinking of another good small thing is that
Yes.
mention of a still small voice. That's something that it's small, it's in the back of your head, but if you listen to it, big things can happen.
Good insight. Good insight. Tuning into that still small voice. I'll give you one little piece of advice if you'll take it. Try it. If it works for you, great. You can't hear that still small voice unless you shut up.
Right.
I would recommend that you take a moment periodically to just be quiet, to just be still. Don't pray. Don't listen to music. Don't read the Bible. Just sit there for just a moment and think. Just be quiet. Maybe you can hear the still small voice. I don't know. I think all of us are a little busy. We are so distracting ourselves that we couldn't hear that still small voice if it hit us with a baseball bat. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks.
He's anticipating our needs.
That reminded me of something my dad said to me that kind of I hadn't thought of this way, is that when you pray, you're talking to the Father and you're coming before his throne. If you were to literally do that and just be like, you're just talking the whole time. But how often do we stop and just pray and say, I'm here, Father, and say nothing?
Yeah.
Maybe we'd hear him say something to us.
Right. Yes, that's an excellent insight. Yeah. I mean, you hear Yeshua say, you think you're going to be heard for your many words? I get that. And there's a time for many words. I think there is. I don't think that that's telling us, don't talk too much. Because when your spirit is agitated, it reminds me of Ushpizin. When our lead character of Ushpizin is tromping through the woods to, he's crying out to God because his spirit is agitated. God is listening to him. But he's got something really weighing on his heart. But I think that's an excellent point that you need to pray, say what you got to say, ask what you got to ask, and then maybe sit quietly and listen. I'll tell you, I don't know if this is me because I think I might have like ADD or something, but when I pray quietly to the Father, my brain goes woo, woo. It's just all over the place. But one thing that really, Evan, would you let the cat out? She's about to kill somebody.
So she could find something.
So one thing that has really made a difference for me is praying out loud. Your mind can't wander if you're speaking out loud. Your mind's very good at wandering if you're just talking to yourself in your mind. So maybe your prayer life can be bettered. And I'm not saying speaking loudly to where people can hear you. It's just you need to hear yourself. It just goes right out of your mouth and into your own ears, so that keeps that loop going and your brain doesn't have an opportunity to go somewhere else. That works for me. I recommend that you try it. Anyone else?
One thing I've done is...
Microphone.
No,
Thank you, Brett.
you have it.
No, you have to have it.
Okay.
People
Well,
online
anyway,
can't hear you.
one thing, not everybody would want to do this, but and I don't do it as like I used to, but I used to write my prayers in a prayer book.
Absolutely.
And your mind can't wander.
Yeah.
And then you read it over again and you wonder if your mind did wander. But
no, I agree.
Yeah.
I know. That's a good insight. Good insight. I want to wrap this up, so I want to move forward just a little bit. You guys have given us some really good insights, and I want to just touch on briefly these two anointed ones. Okay, so I'm gonna come through to this next little section. It's in verse 14 of chapter 4. Chapter 4. It says, "These are the two anointed ones who stand by the Lord of the whole earth." You notice in your Hebrew translation that the literal translation there is not anointed ones. Does anyone see that? It's actually B'nai, I've forgotten the term. It's actually sons of oil. Two sons of oil. Now that's an interesting thing, but it doesn't, is there an actual Hebrew word for anointed? It's Mashiach. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody knows that there's a Hebrew word for anointed. So why did the translators in most English translations, not all, but in most English translations, it says the two anointed ones? Well, because it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But does it make sense to you in any way, shape, or form if we actually translated it literally to two sons of oil? What does that make you think of? I see that you got something going on in your mind, Tracy. Hand it over to her, Brett. Thank you.
What we talked about last time, which I thought was interesting, is thinking about Messiah ben Yosef and Messiah ben David. So it's like the same son, but two different manifestations. So there could be a connection to that.
That's a good insight, yeah. Those two different types of Messiah, so to speak. That's a good insight. It also, I think Angela pointed out to me that it made her think about the virgins with lamps in oil for whatever reason. I don't know exactly how that connection was made, but sons of oil kind of made her think about, was that you, Angela? I think it was.
Yeah, that they had oil.
That they had oil. Not that they were like children of oil, but that they had oil. It just made her think of it. There was a connection there somewhere in her mind. Anyone else? Any ideas about what that makes you think of if you think of sons of oil instead of anointed ones? Nathan?
I don't know if it's already been said, but when I think of the two, I think of the two witnesses. And I see that it talks about the Lord of the earth, which also makes me think of the witnesses, because, there are a bunch of angels standing before the Lord in heaven, right? The cherubim and, other folks too, probably. But when it talks about the two anointed ones, I think of the two witnesses.
Yeah, that's a good insight. Betsy, what do you think?
I think about Yeshua and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of commentators, if you look at these little, these commentaries on the Bible, they often point out that it's most likely literally a reference to Joshua the high priest and Zerubbabel, the governor of Judea. And I'm like, okay, that's an interesting idea. Let me ask you this, and maybe this helps, maybe it doesn't, maybe it just confuses the issue. If you do translate it as anointed, who in the Bible is anointed?
The high priest.
The high priest, and who else? Kings. Kings and priests are the only ones in the Bible who are anointed, aside from stones, when Jacob anoints a stone, which is, it's a nice metaphor about the Messiah, I believe. But if these are two sons of oil or two anointed ones, and the only people we ever see who are anointed in the Bible is either the Messiah because he's a king and a priest. But kings and priests are the only ones who are anointed. So when you go to this Nathan brought up this passage in Revelation 13 regarding the two witnesses. And there's a very key reason why that passage is connected, because I'll get to that in just a moment, but many have read that passage in Revelation and talked about who these two witnesses might be. Some people think it's actually two people. Some people think it's not people at all. Now, I don't know what you do with their dead bodies laying in the street and they get resurrected. And I mean, it sure seems like two people, but I don't know, because there's so many weird metaphors in the book of Revelation. It's like, okay, I can see that it could be an idea instead of a person. But let me read that passage for you from Revelation 13. I happen to have it here on my slide deck. No, I don't. Yes, I do. Revelation 11, 11:3. I think I've got that wrong. It says, I will grant my two witnesses authority to prophesy for 1,260 days dressed in sackcloth. Well, that's talking about, where have we heard the 1,260 days before?
3.5 years.
That's 3.5 years referenced by Daniel the prophet. It's certainly interesting. And then there's a parenthetical that says, these are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. Now, this passage in Revelation is saying that these two witnesses are being equated with two olive trees, two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the whole earth. Do you see anything weird about that? This author, or whatever this parenthetical is not comparing the two witnesses to the two anointed ones directly. But remember that Zechariah asked the angel, what do these two trees symbolize? And he said, oh, these are the two anointed, these are the two sons of oil. But then why in your Bible is there a verse that's in parentheses? Do you have any idea? What does it mean when you see a passage that is in parentheses?
It's not really there.
Sometimes, you know what's interesting? You don't really know. If it's in italics, generally speaking, you can be fairly confident that it's not actually in a lot of the manuscripts, the ancient manuscripts. In a parenthetical, if it appears in parentheses, nobody is frankly really clear what that means. They don't know if sometimes that phrase does not appear in the ancient manuscripts, and it does in others. Sometimes they're not sure if this is a comment that somebody, in 1500 AD was reading the book of Revelation and thought, oh my gosh, that's just like Osmundo did last week. It's like, oh, those are the two anointed ones. Somebody might have put that in the notes. And then later on, it got incorporated. It's a commentary. I'm not saying that it's a commentary. We don't know what that is. Is that John coming in and saying, oh, he sees these two witnesses, and John is injecting his own thoughts in parentheses, which would be slightly weird, wouldn't it? Because this is something interesting that occurred to me. There are very few occasions in the Bible where direct revelation is given to someone and they're told to write it down. You got Moses, which literally had the Torah dictated to him by the mouth of God, like face to face. He told him what to say and he wrote it down. That's unique. That's unique. That doesn't ever happen. Once. Period. But then you got all these other prophets. There are small segments of Jeremiah, for example, where he's told to write this down and give it to the priests, and give to the king, and have them read it in the company of all of the elders of the land. But it doesn't tell us exactly what he told him to write down. Here, we've got a direct line of communication from God to Yeshua to an angel to John. And he tells him specifically, write down what he sees. Now, wouldn't it be slightly weird if he was given direct revelation and told, Write down exactly what you see, and then he decides to put in his own thoughts about what it means. That'd be a little strange. So, it's leading me to the idea, I don't know, that somebody dropped that phrase in there because they thought they knew what this meant. So, can you say that these two witnesses are the two olive trees? Yes, maybe. I don't know. It's just very confusing. And who are these two witnesses? I mean, some people say, oh, well, that's heaven and earth. Because Moses says, I call heaven and earth to be witnesses against you. Angela?
I've been having more of a problem with thinking that the two witnesses are literally two people. That could be. That could totally be. But I'm just trying on the idea that they're not. And when you're going through this and you're saying that kings and priests are the ones who are anointed with oil, and then his question, first he asks, who are these two olive trees? And then he changes his question. He says, who are these two olive branches? Mm-hmm. And you start thinking, okay, who is a king and a priest and a branch and the vine that we're supposed to stay connected to? And so start thinking of that contraption we saw where you have the oil being provided through that to the light source, and they're like this connector thing, because remember those pipes all leading from one to the other. And so it's almost like you have the oil flowing through the body, from its source through the body to provide light to the earth. And so you go back to, it's got to be the first mention of two witnesses that I call heaven and earth in Deuteronomy, right? I mean, whenever you say two witnesses, I keep thinking heaven and earth. And so you have this connector. And is it alluding to this connection between heaven and earth? That, like Jacob's ladder, where the head was in the heavens and it stood on the ground, but that ladder is who?
Yeshua.
So we're back to the king, the priest, the branch, the ladder, the door, the connector between heaven and earth. And that is the two witnesses, and his body would be those connected from the earth to the heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. Ella? Excellent insight. Excellent insight.
I was just thinking there's so many like sets of two in the Bible. I think what Angie was saying was a great point, and it kind of made me think of this. And this may be a stretch. I don't know. I think it can be multiple things, and I had the idea that because the word sons is in there, and anointed is in there, and branches is in there, it made me think of Ephraim and Judah. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
That's a good insight. Ephraim and Judah, that's a good insight. Interesting stuff, isn't it? I mean, this is a very puzzling vision that is not entirely clear to me. And I think that's the best thing we can do. And I think I've mentioned to you many times that what's important is not that I have the answers to tell you exactly what these things mean, or not even that you have the answers that you know exactly what these things mean. What it is that we have lodged these things in your brain, and they are now there for later recall by the Spirit should you need them, right? If we're achieving nothing else other than just implanting the word in your mind, that the Spirit can bring it forth and give you clarity at some point in the future in some new way, then you will win. You win the prize. Angela?
The sled story?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And this is related to a movie that Cadence introduced us to a while back that we watched. I've forgotten the name of it.
The Giver.
The Giver, yes, thank you. I don't know if you've heard of that movie.
There was something that happened in that movie that made me think of what Alan was just talking about with prophecy and why we study it even though we can't figure it out. There's this kid in the movie, and I'm probably getting this wrong, but this is the way I understood it because I've only seen the movie once, was this kid was raised in a society where he'd never seen snow or a sled or anything like that. It was like this utopia thing, but he kept having this dream where he was running through the snow and he found this sled, and then he went down the hill in the sled to get to where he needed to go quicker. Well, later in the movie, he breaks out of the bounds of this utopia and he's running along, and he comes across this thing in the snow, And because he's had this dream before about this object that he'd never seen, he knew what to do with it. It was like in the moment when it came upon him, then he knew what to do with it. And I thought, what if that's that way with prophecy, where we sit here and we kick this stuff around and we kind of work with it and we don't know quite what to do with it, but maybe someday in the future when the situation arises where that is needed, we'll be like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do with that.
Yeah, if nothing else, that's worth something. Just having that in your...
The oil in your lamp.
The oil in your lamp. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. A perfect metaphor, having oil in your lamp so that you can light it when the time comes. So if nothing else, there you go. Ladies and gentlemen, I am wrapping up. It's been delightful hanging out.